Good morning, students. Welcome back to Java programming class. In the last session, we have seen some of the concepts related to your threads. We discussed the concept of daemon thread, thread priority, thread group, and how these concepts are helpful in order to achieve the multi-threading in Java that we have discussed. So there are a few more concepts which are left out in the multi-threading that we need to conclude in today's session. And after concluding those concepts, I will also try to go for the concept of AWT, that is Abstract Window Toolkit, and it is also one of the important concept in Java to achieve GUI. GUI is nothing but graphical user interface. To get the graphics, to get the so far whatever programs we have seen the command based programs, command line based programs. Okay, we are giving the input in the form of text to the program, and the program is processing the text, and it is returning the output in the form of text only. Okay, we are seeing the output on the console, that is nothing but the output screen. Okay, so it is also possible to develop applications with the help of GUI in Java, that we are going to achieve with the help of AWT. Okay, that we will see once we complete this multi-threading concepts. So quickly, without wasting much time, we'll go to that the remaining concepts in multi-threading. So these join method, naming threads, current thread, priority of threads, daemon threads, okay, thread groups, all these we have completed in our previous session. So quickly, in today's session, we will see the synchronization in Java. So synchronization, the term, if you know the dictionary meaning, it is something keeping more than one thing on track. Okay, suppose if one thing is getting delayed, or one thing is going too fast, so what we do the synchronization over there. So audio video synchronization, you might have heard this one. Whenever we download some movies on the internet, what will happen, we come across audio video synchronization problem. Okay, we used to face such type of problems. So generally, in order to get the perfect audio, what we do the synchronization in your players will allow us to do the synchronization, audio video synchronization, so that we can watch the movie with more clarity. Okay, so synchronization is a process of keeping more than one thing on track, or keeping more than one thing in a particular order, we can say. So here, if you read the definition of this term, synchronization in Java is the capability to control the access of multiple threads so that they share the common resource. Okay, first of all, I will let you know what problems you will get if you don't do the synchronization. Let us suppose we have a resource in the sense any computer resource. It may be the CPU cycles, it may be the memory location, it may be the input output device, anything. Okay, it may be a variable's content, or it may be a file. Okay, whatever it may be, we call it as an resource in your computer terminology. So resource R1 we have, and let us say we have two threads, T1, T2, and they are competing to access this resource R1. Okay, T1 also wants this resource to complete its operation, and T2 threads, it is also expecting the access of this R1 resource to complete its operation. Okay, this is the overall scenario. So generally what will happen, when they are competing, whenever this resource is available, or we can say if they are accessing this resource without any lock or something, so what will happen, this resource, both will put the pressure on this resource to get the access. So let us assume if there is no lock, both will get the access as well. But what happens, so let us say The content of this R1 is, let us say we are storing some 24 as a value over here. I am taking the example of simple variable to explain this one. So the content of this R1 is the 24 value. So now T1 resource wants to access that value and T2 resource also wants to access that value. So when T1 resource is accessing that value, T1 is getting 24. Okay, let us assume T1 is getting 24. After some point in its access, what T1 is doing means T1 is modifying the content of this variable. Okay, let us say it is adding some 10 to this one. Okay, after getting the access, T1, what it is doing, it is manipulating. So it is adding 10 to that value 24. So now what will be the value? The value will become 34 now. After adding 10 to 24, it will become 34 now. So after some portion, some time instance, T2 also wants to access the value. Let us assume. Then what will happen? Both got the access, T1 modified, now T2 tries to access that value. So what will happen? It will get 34 because the value got modified, isn't it? So T2 gets 34, but what T2 is expecting, the T2 is expecting the old value. And T2 is completely unaware that T1 also accessing that value and T1 modified that value. And what T2 thinks that whatever value it is accessing, it is correct only, so it will do the calculations on that 34 value. Okay, so this kind of problem will come. So this we call it as the problem if there is no synchronization. That's the reason we need to have a proper synchronization before giving any shared resources, any shared resource to thread. Okay. Uh, so to avoid such a condition, so whatever condition, whatever error I have explained just now, so to avoid such a condition, what we have to do, we need to control these threads T2 and T1. So that control in accessing the resource is nothing but nothing but synchronization. So the way how we are controlling these two threads so that they will access this resource R1 consistently without any issues. Okay, to maintain the consistency, we can say over here, to maintain the consistency, we are going for synchronization. Okay, Java synchronization is a better option where we want to allow only one thread to access the shared resource. So through synchronization, what we are doing is we are allowing only one thread to access, no two threads simultaneous access. Now only one thread can access the shared resource, and when the other thread will get the access to that shared resource, in the sense when first thread releases that one, when the first thread after access, when the first thread releases this resource, then only the second thread will gain the access and gain the access and utilizes that particular resource. So this is the concept of synchronization, where only one thread is allowed to access the shared resource. So why we have to go for synchronization? Okay, we discussed this already. In my previous slide explanation only I have given that idea. The synchronization is mainly used to prevent thread interference. Interference in the sense when one thread is under execution and when one thread is using some computer resource, the other thread is interfering over there. So such a thing is a bad thing. Already I showed you such a thing is not good in computer science, or not good in computer terminology. We should have to avoid such kind of thing. Okay, so to prevent thread interference, the first we are going for synchronization, and the other one is the consistency problem. The consistency problem is nothing but when one thread is modifying the content, the other thread is not getting the accurate result, because of whatever the first thread is doing the modification with the shared resource, the same result will go to the second thread, or interim result will go to the second thread, we can say. Okay, so there must be a proper technique needs to be maintained in order to achieve the in order to avoid this consistency problem, and that technique is nothing but your synchronization. Okay, so thread interference to prevent, consistency problem to prevent, we are going for synchronization. Thread synchronization only, we are going for thread synchronization. So there are basically two types of synchronizations. One is thread synchronization and the other one is process synchronization. But as we are studying all the concepts with respect to the threads, we will see what are the different types of thread synchronization. I mean, we focus mainly on thread synchronization only. We are not going for process synchronization. Remember this one. So quickly we go and see what is thread synchronization. So synchronizing the threads so that they will access the shared resource one after the other is nothing but thread synchronization. Okay, there are two types of thread synchronizations. The first one is the mutual exclusion. Okay, mutual exclusion, and the second one is inter-thread communication. We also call it as the cooperation. Okay, inter-thread communication is nothing but the cooperation, where multiple threads will access the shared resource in a cooperative way. Okay, in a cooperative way. Remember this one. So mutual exclusion further divided into three types. So how we are going to achieve this mutual exclusion? Mutual exclusion in the sense, when one thread is accessing, the other thread must be excluded from access. So that is, we call it as a mutual exclusion. Okay, when two threads are competing for a particular resource, when T1, T2, as I have shown in my previous explanation, when more than one thread or when two threads are competing for a particular thread to access, simply when one gaining the access, the other one must be excluded. Okay, the other one must be excluded under until and unless the first one releases that resource. Okay, until and unless the first one is releasing this resource, the other threads has to be excluded from access. This is nothing but mutual exclusion concept. Okay, so there are two ways in which we can achieve the synchronization. The first one is mutual exclusion, and the second one is inter-thread communication. So first one is divided into three types: synchronized method, synchronized block, and static synchronization. Okay, these three things. And then we have the inter-thread communication, that is cooperative approach. Okay, cooperative synchronization or the inter-thread communication in Java, we can say. So one by one we need to discuss all these things so that we can move ahead and we see what further concepts we have. Okay, so the first one, mutual exclusion type of synchronization. It is further divided into three by synchronized method, synchronized block, and static synchronization. Okay, so the first one, before going to that one, the concept of lock we need to understand in Java. So lock is nothing but when a particular thread is requesting for a particular object, or when a particular thread is requesting for a particular resource, what it will do, it will put a lock on that one. Okay, immediately after gaining the access to that particular resource, what it will do, it will put a lock on that one. Lock is nothing but it is some kind of monitor. Okay, monitor week. Okay, everything I will explain. What is monitor, what is lock, and how we are going to achieve lock. Everything I will explain. How we are going to achieve mutual exclusion, that also I am going to explain. Okay, so synchronization, it is basically built around the internal entity known as the lock or monitors. The concept is very simple. See, I will explain over here. We have a resource R1, same thing, and we have two threads T1, T2. They are competing for this resource to access. Okay, so when they are competing, there is a guarantee that only one thread will gain the access first, isn't it? Both cannot go simultaneously for that R1. Okay, that is the rarest of the rare case, we can say. Okay, when both threads are competing, only one thread will get the access first. So whoever is getting the access, it has to retain the access, isn't it? It has to retain the access so that the other thread should be excluded. Okay, so that the other thread should be excluded. So how it will gain means, they will maintain a variable inside your computer. They will maintain a variable with name monitor. Monitor is equals to, with some value, let us say it is 1. Okay, they are taking 1. So always the value needs to be 1 in order to gain the access. So T1, okay, before gaining the access, what it will check? It will check for the monitor value. If it is 1, it will gain the access. So now the T1 gained the access. So it will start accessing that one. So how this variable acts like a lock over here? How this monitor acts like a lock over here, in the sense, when T1 gaining the access, okay, before gaining, when it is checking the monitor value, if it is 1, okay, before start accessing, before starting the access of this resource R1, what T1 will do means, it will do monitor minus minus. it will do monitor minus minus. So what does it mean? The monitor value goes to 0 now. Okay, the monitor value goes to 0 now. So when the monitor value is 0, no other thread is allowed to access that resource. T1 after gaining the access, what it is doing? It is doing monitor minus minus. Monitor minus minus is nothing but decrementing the value of monitor, and once the value decremented, it became 0. And now let us assume T2 is trying to access the resource R1. So what it has to do, it has to check the value of monitor first. So what is the value of monitor? Monitor value is 0. So can T2 gain the access of R1? No, it will not gain. Why? Means the monitor value should be 1 in order to gain the access. So because the monitor value is 0, T2 will be restricted, or T2 will be avoided. T2 will be excluded from the access, we can say. So now when T2 will gain the access means after T1 completing its complete operations, all the operations on this R1 resource, what it will do? It will release that resource by calling monitor plus plus. Simply what it will do, when it is releasing, it will do monitor plus plus. Then what will happen? Monitor value goes to 1 now. So now it is free for operate, isn't it? It is free for access. So T2 will check the monitor value, and once T2 got the monitor value 1, what it will do? It will gain the access to this R1 and it will start executing that one. It will start executing that one, R1. So like that. So in this way, what we are doing? We are excluding one thread from gaining the access of a particular resource, or in this way with the help of monitor we are locking a particular object or a particular entity or a particular resource inside the computer under the full control of a particular thread, so that other threads will be excluded whenever they are requesting for the access. Hopefully you understood this one. The concept of monitor, because we rarely use that in programming, in Java programming especially. So concept of monitor, it is under concurrent class. Okay, concurrent lock class, util package, concurrent lock class. Okay, this is the hierarchy, package hierarchy, where we have the lock class, and the concept of monitor, it is implemented under locks class only. Okay, remember this one. So first of all, we need to understand what happens if we don't have the synchronization, if we go in a liberal way, or if you allow all the threads to access the same what we call resource inside the computer, how the threads will go inaccurately, that we will see first. So in order to understand that one, we have implemented a class with name table, and over here the purpose of this table class is to print the elements I mean to print the mathematical table last column values. So like we are writing 1 ones 1, 1 twos 2, like that, isn't it? So we are going to print the last column value, whatever values we are getting in that last column we try to print that one. So that's the reason we are here. You can see we are reading some value n, and we are trying to print the first 5 values. Okay, first 5 resultant values from the mathematical table. Here you can print the entire mathematical table also, but that is not our intention. Okay, so simply we are trying to print the last column values only over here. So this for loop will do that one, and after printing each entry on the output screen, we are delaying this second print with 400 milliseconds by using this sleep method call. You can see here we have the sleep method call with 400. So what will happen after printing each entry, the thread will go to sleep for 400 milliseconds. So when one thread is going for sleep, the other thread will gain the control and it will print some other a different value in between, we can say. So quickly, without synchronization we will get the values not in order, but with synchronization we will get all the values in a particular order. Okay, you will see, you will understand the difference. So here, I'm creating 2 different threads. That is my thread 1, which is that is also implementing the thread class, and we have my thread 2 class, which is also implementing the thread class. So inside it we are creating the table class object, and we are receiving this table class object from the main function or main method, and using that we are initiating this t to this t. Then we are running the run method, and inside that run method we are calling the print table method. So whatever method we have implemented over here, print table method, that method we are calling over here. So whenever you create the thread of this, whenever you create the object of this thread class, and when you invoke the start method on that object, what will happen? It will directly come to this run method. And inside this run, when it sees this, I mean this thread, my thread 1, when it will be invoked, I mean when you are creating the object, at that time only you are invoking the my thread class constructor. So at that time you are passing the object of the table class, and whatever object you pass from there, that object will come inside this table class object. And using the table class object, we are invoking the print table method, print table with 5. So this 5 will go to here. So it will print the table of 5, the resultant values from the table of 5, the first 5 resultant values from the table of 5, like that. Okay, so here when you pass the 100, it will print the first 5 values from the 100 table. Okay, resultant value from the 100 table. The concept is very simple. I will try to implement the same thing over there, I mean in my edit plus, and I will show you the output without synchronization and with synchronization, how the things will change. Quickly we see. Okay, go to your edit plus. So here I have my edit plus. So in this, first what we have to do, yes, you start writing the class, the table class. Inside this table class, what we are doing, we are creating a method void, isn't it? Void method only. Yes, print table of integer value we are receiving into n. Okay, next thing what we are doing, in it we are taking a for loop. Okay, integer I equals to, from 1 we are starting, and I must be less than or equals to 5 we are saying, and then I plus plus. Remove these remaining things. And here in this one, what we are doing, simply put system dot out dot println uh, println of print n multiplied with I. Okay, simply. Okay, then use the try block, because we are making this thread to sleep for a particular amount of time. Okay, so make the thread, so whatever thread we are receiving here, uh, yes, thread dot sleep of, let us say some 400 milliseconds we are making this thread to sleep. Then here inside catch block, interrupted exception will occur, interrupted exception IE will occur. Come down, and here you can print that exception entry on the output screen. Okay, system dot out dot print ln of IE. Close this, put the semicolon at the end. Okay, this is it. In this particular class we will write only this one. Then go for another class, my thread 1. Okay, and which should extends the thread class. So inside it, what we are doing, first you write the constructor my thread 1 constructor, and here create the, because we are going to pass the table class object over here, table only, right? Yes, table class object over here. And yeah, when you are calling the constructor here, you can receive that table t, and in this you put that this dot t equals to t. Whatever t we received, that is here, and whatever t we are passing, that is here. Okay, okay, then after this what we need to do, call the run method, void of uh, run method, and inside run what we are doing, we are calling that print table method, t dot uh, print table, p small, right? P small and T capital, print table. Okay, print table method. Hopefully we have written that same thing over here, print table. Here you put print table and pass some value, let us say some 5. I'm printing the value of, I mean table of 5. Then class my thread 2 extends thread. So here take the same thing, table t, and put my to of table T under it. Okay, here same thing, this dot T equals to T, come down and void run method, and inside run invoke the printable method using T class object. Okay, using T. So that is T dot print table of, let us say here we are passing 100. So now this is over. So now you write your class, public class, that is test demo. Okay, class test demo, and in it you put your public static void main of string args, something like this, and in it what we have to do, create the table class object, because we need to pass this object to the constructors. Table T is equals to new table of, that's it. Okay, new table of, then create the thread my thread 1, that is T1 equals to new my thread of T. Okay, my thread of T. Same thing, my thread 2 T2 equals to new my thread of T. T2 T1 both we got. Now next thing, using T1 dot start invoke the start method, and T2 dot start method, we are invoking both. Save this. Okay, program got saved. Just go and compile from tools, compile. Okay, there are issues. Okay, run method, why it is not allowing us? Okay, so here we must make the run method as public. Because of that reason it is not allowing us, because run method, it is already public in runnable interface. So that's the reason we need to make the uh, access specifier of this run method as public. Okay, still my thread 1. Okay, I have done spelling mistake over here in my, okay, here you can see this must be main thread, my thread 1, and this must be my thread 2. Okay, because we are invoking the constructors, and my thread, there is no such class we have implemented. Compile, no issues, then go run. As you can see how it is printing, they are not synchronized, everybody getting their priority, and according to the priority, and whenever they are seeing the resource, they are simply printing it. Okay, so synchronized in the sense, all the outputs we need to get in a synchronized manner. First when one thread is gaining the control access, it has to complete its complete full operations, then only it has to release that particular resource. Okay, when one thread getting the CPU cycles, it has to execute overall statements, then only it has to go for the other thread. So threads will be executed simultaneously, but in a synchronized fashion or synchronized manner, we can say. So quickly to show that one, how we can achieve means, just make this whatever print table method we have written, that table as a synchronized. So this is the situation, or this is the problem, understanding the problem without the synchronization that we have done. So that we understood. Okay, without synchronization, how we are getting the output means, in an unsynchronized way we are getting, in an unordered way we are getting. So Java synchronized method, so it is simple thing, just we need to use this synchronized keyword before the method name wherever you are writing those statements, printing statements, or wherever you are making a particular thread to go sleep. you make that method as a synchronized method so as to get the output in a synchronized way. So if you declare any method as synchronized, it is known as synchronized method. Synchronized method is used to lock an object for any shared resource. So whatever resources we are keeping or whatever statements for execution we are keeping inside that synchronized method, what will happen that those things will be executed in a continuous manner without any delays or without any sharing with the other resources. Likewise, all the resources in synchronized block will be executed in a orderly manner or in a synchronized fashion, we can say. When a thread invokes a shared synchronized method, we have to say like this: when a thread invokes a shared synchronized method, it automatically acquires the lock on it. What it is doing, it is getting a kind of lock on it for that method or for that object, and releases it when the thread completes its task. When it will release? After completing the complete task only it will releases that lock. So once the lock is released, it is free for acquiring by other threads. Okay, so what we have to do, simply make our shared method as public, sorry, synchronized. So here you can see our print table method. What we are doing to that method, we are making it synchronized. By using this keyword synchronized, we are making our shared method synchronized so that it will be executed in a synchronized fashion. So as you can see here, now the rest of the code is same, just we need to put synchronized for our print table method. So now as you can see, we are getting the output, the first five and outputs, the first five results from your mathematical table, that is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Then it is starting the 100th table, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. Likewise, we are getting the entries on the output screen. So quickly go and make your print table method as a synchronized method, so to see the what we call output. So we need to put that synchronized before the return type. So synchronized, okay, like this. Synchronized is the keyword, void is also return type, then print table. Now what will happen, for that same program we will get the output in a synchronized way, because now the resources are synchronized. Okay, run. As you can see, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. We are getting the result output in a synchronized way. Hopefully you understood this one. So the next thing, we have the synchronized block. It is also one of the way to achieve the synchronization in Java. So in our previous case, we made the entire complete method as synchronized. But if your choice or if your option is you don't want to make the complete method as synchronized, rather you want to go with a particular, okay, 2-3 statements from the method. Okay, you don't want to make your entire method as synchronized, rather you want to make only 2-3 statements as synchronized. Then you have to go for synchronized block, because your method, it is containing a lot of things. Like, let us say we have method, and in it you are having like these many statements. Okay, over here what we are doing, in order to execute these statements synchronized way, okay, one after the other thread, what we are doing, we are making this method as synchronized. Okay, synchronized. Okay, this method is synchronized now. So but my intention, I don't want the complete method to be synchronized, rather I want only the center 4 lines. Okay, only these 4 lines as synchronized, and rest of the code I want to execute like a normal. Then what you have to, don't make the method as synchronized, so make the method as a regular method only. And here you put those 2 statements, because these 2 statements are out of the synchronize. So now you create the synchronized block, same using that same keyword synchronized. We are creating a synchronized block in the sense, just like this, you put open curly bracket, closed curly bracket with the synchronized keyword. Now you put that 4 lines of code into that synchronized block, and after this block put the remaining statements like this, 1, 2. So now what will happen, only this particular block will be synchronized, and remaining statements, they will be executed like normal. Okay, like shade. Hopefully you understood. Just go and see that one over here. Okay, first let's just understand the program. Okay, So when we have to go for synchronized block, if you don't want your complete method to be synchronized, rather we want a small portion of the method as synchronized, then we have to go for synchronized block. So the syntax to use this synchronized block is like this. Simply you have to put the synchronized followed by any object reference. If you want to give that object reference, you can give, and if you don't have any object reference, simply put the block. Okay, simply put opening bracket and closing bracket likewise. So here, as you can see, in my previous case, what I have done, I made this entire print table as the synchronized method. From here to here, I made this entire print table method as the synchronized method. But now I'm taking the help of this synchronized block on the current object, whatever class in which we are writing this synchronized block. Because inside it I'm creating the, okay, I'm using the thread over here, thread class. So in order to make this thread functional, I need to pass this class object over here. Okay, so now what will happen? Yeah, this particular thing from here to here, it will be considered as an synchronized block. And if you want to put any normal statement, you can put after the synchronized block inside the method. Okay, likewise. So quickly, what we have to do, minor change, remaining all same, only minor change we have to do. Okay, instead of making the complete method as synchronized, just remove this one. I don't want my complete method to be synchronized, so just remove this one. Rather, what I want only the synchronized block that you can start over here. Synchronized of this and startup block, and that you can close after the for, like this. So now this is closing here, this is closing here, and the class is closing here. Okay, likewise. Save this, go compile. As you can see, no issues. Then you can run also. See here, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. Likewise, we are getting the result in a synchronized way. Okay, so this is synchronized block. So we have another concept like static synchronization, the last concept in achieving this one. Then after we will go to the inter-thread communication, or we can say cooperation. So static synchronization, see, generally, I mean, till now we have taken either on the block or on the method the synchronized keyword. But if your method is static method, and that synchronized keyword, in order to call that method, I mean public table method, how we are doing that one? With the help of the object reference we are doing. Okay, with the help of object reference only we are invoking the method. But if you make that method as a static method, then your object reference will not work over there, isn't it? So in order to call the what we call static method, we need to depend on the class, isn't it? We need to depend on the class name. So by using the class name only, we are invoking the static methods. So when you are making your static method as synchronized, so your object, as your object reference is not working over there, you need to depend on the class, okay, class name, in order to invoke the methods which are there inside, in order to invoke the static method over there. So if you make any static method as synchronized, then the lock will be on the class but not on the object, because there is no object, there is no object reference, there is no need of object reference in order to invoke the what we call synchronized, sorry, not synchronized, static method. There will be no object reference required in order to invoke the static method. Okay, hopefully you understood. Just go and see here. Yeah, if you don't put the static synchronization, suppose there are two objects, I mean, see, in order to differentiate between the objects the content of sharing, in order to differentiate, we have to go for this static synchronization. How we are achieving? Simply make your method as static and put the synchronized keyword. Our print table method, that same method we are making it as synchronized, but previously it was only a non-void, previously it was only void method, but now we are making it as static method as well. So synchronized static void print table. So in our, now previously we invoked this print table method with the help of object references, but now, as you know, the object references will not work out. So no, yeah, we need to modify a lot of things. No need of constructors now, and no need of passing the objects now, because we don't need table class object now in order to invoke print table. Print table is now static, so directly with the help of class name we can invoke that method. So that modifications, that changes we need to do, and then we need to see how we can get the output on the output screen. So quickly, so what we have to do, what modifications here, you make this method as, first of all, make this as synchronized and void, and you make that method as static also, as you can see. Okay, synchronize static void print table. Now no need of this block over here, remove this one, and from down also you need to remove one curly bracket, this extra curly bracket you need to remove. Okay, then come to this my thread, and here we don't need this constructor, remove this entire thing, just put the run method, that's enough. Okay, just put the run method, and inside that run method we not gonna call, I think, yes, we not gonna call this method with the help of t, rather what we do, we put table, because print table method is, it is a static method and object reference is not required. Directly with the help of class you can call, class name you can call, so no need to create the object, no need to pass the object, just with the help of class name. That is the advantage of static method, isn't it? So class test demo, and in it again here also no need of this one, simply create your with the help of your thread, my thread and my thread 2 class objects with the help of constructor calls, default constructor calls. Now create, I mean instantiate those two threads with the help of start method. So now what will happen, again you will get the same thing. Okay, this is also one of the approach to achieve the synchronization. By making the synchronized method as static, no need to depend on the what we call object reference of the class, rather we can go with directly the class name. As you can see, 10, 20, 25, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, like that, then 100 table, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, like that we got the entries. So you, how many you want, that many objects you can create for the classes, and that many um, I mean threads you can create, and that many threads you can send to the runnable state, so that your thread scheduler will select a particular thread for execution. Hopefully you understood this thing. So then we have the yeah, the concept of deadlock. So see here, I will explain this one. Let us assume we have two threads, and we have two resources. Okay, two threads and two resources. So thread, they are competing for the resources now. So thread 1 and thread 2, as they have shown over here, same thing I am taking, thread 1 and thread 2, and we have the resources uh, T1 and T2. Resource T1 and resource T2. Over here what is happening, so T2 so R1 R2 you take better, because maybe T1 T2, in the sense you may be, there is a possibility that you will understand it like a thread. So I will remove this, instead making it as T1 T2. What I have to do, I should make this as R1 R2, so that you will get the similarity in name and you will remember it perfectly. So R1 we have the resource 1, and R2 we have the resource 2. So now how these threads, thread 1 and thread 2, will I mean compete for these resources means, let us assume R1 is I mean thread 1 is competing for R1 as well as R2, and thread 2 is also competing for R1 and R2. Okay, then what will happen, thread 1, let us assume, got the access to this R1, acquired this R1, thread 1 acquired R1, then thread 2 acquired R2. Okay, thread 2 acquired R2, like this. Now in order to complete the, so acquired, I think we have to show in this way. Okay, acquired in the sense we have to show in a different way. Acquired means already gained, right? Already gained the access, so that we need to show in this way. R1 already gained by the thread 1 and R2 already gained by the thread 2. R1 gained by thread 1, R2 gained by thread 2, like this. Now in order to complete the operations of thread 2, we need, or we can say thread 2 need R1 as well. It needs R1 as well. Same thing, in order to complete the operations of thread 1, we need R2. Okay, so now what will happen? So when, see, in order to complete the thread 1 operation, what we need? We need, in order to complete the operations of, once again I need to draw. Okay, we said R1 is already gained or acquired by thread 1. R2 is already acquired by thread 2. So now in order to complete its operation, thread 2 requires R1. See, an arrow mark from the thread 2 resource means it is still not acquired, but it is required. Okay, so here also arrow mark from thread 1 to R2, it states that thread 1 requires R2 but not yet acquired. So see here, R1 is in the hold of thread 1 and R2 is in the hold of thread 2. So in order to complete thread 1, we need R2, which is already holded by thread 2. So in order to complete thread 2, we need R1, which is already holded by thread 1. So what will happen in this particular situation? Neither of the thread complete its operation, and a situation, a condition of deadlock will occur. So to complete a thread 1, we need R2, isn't it? To complete thread 1, we need R2, and R2 is acquired by thread 2. So when thread 2 will release R2, when it complete its execution, it will release R2. So does it going to release that R2? Never. Why means? Because in order to complete thread 2 also, we need R1, and that R1 is already under the control of R1. Okay, under the control of thread 1, we can say. So when this thread 1 going to release this R1 only after its completion. Does it going to complete its execution? Never, because it also requires R2, and which is under the hold of, under the control of thread 2. So in this way, neither of these two threads, neither thread 1 nor thread 2 will complete its execution, and they will wait forever. They will wait forever. This type of locking mechanism, we call it as a deadlock situation. Okay, deadlock situation. If you read these three statements, you will understand the same thing. So in order to avoid this deadlocking, we will go for inter-thread communication, or we can say the cooperation. Okay, inter-thread communication or cooperation is all about allowing synchronized threads to communicate with each other. Not only they will put locks on the resources, but also whenever it is possible, they will communicate. They will communicate in the sense, here thread 2, thread 1 I have shown now. Here thread 1 will tell thread 2 that I am already holding R1 and I need R2, which is under your control. Kindly release that R2 so that I can use that R2 to complete my execution. So yeah, it is, otherwise we both will wait forever, isn't it? We both will wait forever. So this situation, to explain, I will give you one simple example. Let us assume that two customers have went to a bank to open an account. Okay, so let us assume one customer is having two applications forms, and the other customer is having the pen. Okay, so they both went to open the account. So one customer is having excess application form, and other customer is having excess pen. Let us assume in that way. So what they have to do, they have to communicate, and they have to agree that if you give the pen to me, I will give my extra application form to you. If you give that extra pen to me, I will give my extra application form to you, so that we both can complete the application procedure and we can go for account opening. If they don't communicate, and if they both sit in the bank, I mean, is it I mean, are they going to open their account? Not possible, isn't it? So that this kind of thing is a deadlock situation, and definitely threads needs to communicate in order to avoid this type of deadlock condition, and that communication we are going to achieve in inter-thread communication concept or cooperation concept. Okay. Cooperation is a mechanism in which a thread is past running. So what will happen? Even though the thread 2 is holding R2 resource, it will be passed. It will be passed in the sense it will be kept under hold condition, or it will be kept under runnable state so that it will release the resources. Okay, in its critical section, and another thread is allowed to enter or lock in the same critical section to be executed. So no two threads. Okay, when all the resources or when all the what we call required stuff is there with you, then only you are allowed to enter the critical situation. Okay, critical section. The problem of critical section you are going to study in operating systems in detail. So we will maintain a separate section called as critical section, where a particular thread is allowed to enter only when it is having all the resources. So in our deadlock condition, neither of the threads are having the proper resources, so they both will be kept on hold. Okay, they both have to release their resources. If they are competing for the resources in such a way that they are framing the deadlock, then the both will be kept on hold, and both the resources will be released so that the other threads will consume those resources and complete their execution. Okay, so likewise. So and this kind of inter-thread communication is achieved with the help of three important methods. So wait, hold, wait, notify, and notify all. These three methods are very important in order to go for this inter-thread communication. See here, wait method, it will causes the current thread, to release the lock and wait until either another thread invokes the notify method. So if there is a possibility of deadlock condition, what the thread will do means it will invoke the wait method on itself, and it will enter into the waiting state. Our waiting state is nothing but our runnable state. So the thread will enter into runnable state, and it will before entering into the runnable state, what it has to do, holding the lock or acquiring the resources, you cannot enter into the runnable state. Before entering into the runnable state, what you have to do, you have to release all the resources. You have to hand over all the resources to the operating system before entering into the runnable state. Once you are into the runnable state, so you have to wait into the runnable state only until and unless the other priority thread will come to you and will notify you that it has completed all its operations, and now it's your turn to complete the operation. The concept is very simple. See, if a particular deadlock situation is raising in your system environment, immediately what we are doing, we are pushing a particular thread. I mean, from two threads. Let us assume two threads. Thread 1, thread 2 are framing the deadlock situation over there. So immediately what we are doing, we are making any one from these two threads to enter into the what we call a waiting state. That waiting state is nothing but the runnable state. And how the thread is entering into the runnable state? By calling the wait method. If the wait method is invoked on that particular thread, the thread will enter into waiting state. That is nothing but the runnable state. So once the thread is in runnable state, before entering into the runnable state only, it has to hand over all the resources, whatever it was holding, all the resources it has to hand over to the JVM before entering into the runnable state. And how long it is going to be in the runnable state, in the sense, until and unless the other executing thread, the other running thread, after consuming all the resources, it completes its operations. And once it completes its operations, before terminating or before entering into the terminated state, what it will do, it will notify the waiting thread. Otherwise, what will happen, that thread will remain in the waiting state forever. Okay, and we don't call this as a cooperation, isn't it? We don't call this as a cooperation. So here both the threads, they are framing the deadlock situation, so they are working cooperatively. Now one thread is executing the wait method and entering into the runnable state, or entering into the what we call the waiting state. Why it is entering into the waiting state means, because it is because both the threads have come to a conclusion that they will do the work cooperatively. Okay, first thread is entering into the waiting state, and other thread is completing its execution, and after completing its execution, again the thread has to go back to the waiting thread, and it has to inform that waiting thread that it has completed the operation, so that the other thread will wake up and complete its operation. So notify is a method where a completed thread will notify the waiting thread that it has completed the execution. Okay, if more number of threads are waiting in the waiting state for the execution of a particular thread, then it is the responsibility of the completed thread that it has to notify all the threads that it has completed its execution. So that how it is going to achieve means with the help of notify all. Okay, simply read the method name and description. So, and whenever a particular thread is entering into the waiting state, or whenever a particular thread is invoking the wait method on it, there is a possibility of interrupted exception. That's the reason you are seeing that interrupted exception in the signature, method signature. Okay, wait until object is notified. Object is notified is nothing but the other threads will notify this particular thread's object that they have completed the execution with the help of notify method call. So yeah, notify method, yeah, already I explained the purpose of this one. It is used to notify the other waiting thread objects that a particular thread has completed its execution. So notify all wakes up all the threads. Notify method only wakes up a particular thread. Okay, so then here I have shown that same thing, entering into the system and acquiring the resources, and after completing releases the resources, or before entering into the what we call runnable state, or before entering into the waiting state, then also it has to release all the resources. Okay, so the same thing explanation here we have given. Then we have the differences between wait and sleep method. There are a few differences. Yeah, wait method releases the lock and sleep method doesn't releases the lock. So as I said, when a particular thread is entering into the waiting state or runnable state, by invoking the sleep method, it will not release any resources. It will take all those resources with it when it is entering into the waiting or sleeping state. But whereas wait method, before invoking the wait method only, or we can say before entering into the waiting state, before entering into the runnable state, the thread has to release, or the thread has to surrender all its holding resources. Okay, and this wait method is the method of object class, and the sleep method is the method of thread class. Your wait method is not a static method, and your sleep method is a static method. That's the reason whenever we are invoking the sleep method, we are using the thread class, not the object class name we are using whenever we are invoking the sleep method. You might have observed that for in my previous example, whenever I was invoking the sleep method, I have used the thread class name, not the object of thread class. Okay, yes, this wait method to release, or in order to wake up a particular thread from the waiting state, we need to invoke the notify method. That is not required in the sleep. Whatever time period you are specifying as an argument to this sleep method, that time period has to be elapsed before the thread will come into active state. Okay, so a simple example we have in order to demonstrate that inter-thread communication. Okay, initially we are making the amount value as 10,000, then we are making a synchronized method, a withdraw method, and whenever you are withdrawing the amount, you need to check it should be less than the balance. Otherwise we are printing a message that balance is less, and that particular withdrawal method will wait forever. So so that the deposit method will deposit the amount. Okay, here we are making, basically we are making two methods over here. One method is responsible for depositing the amount, and other method is responsible for withdrawing the amount. So here you can see, okay, the deposit method here we have, the withdrawal method here we have. So withdrawal, definitely the amount has to be less than the balance amounts, then only you can perform the what we call the withdrawal. If it is not possible, then what we are saying, we are saying less balance. Okay, or say whatever amount you are forwarding, if it is less than the available amount. Okay, whatever amount you are forwarding, it is greater than the available amount, or whatever withdrawal amount you have selected. So over here, whatever amount I am specifying between the parentheses, this is the amount you have selected for withdrawal. Okay, this is the amount you have selected for withdrawal. So that is nothing but this amount variable. Okay, this and this, both of these are same, and whatever this dot amount I have written over here, this dot amount is nothing but the amount variable which we have declared inside the customer class, and it is going to have a fixed value, isn't it? So this amount, let us assume, if it is greater than the available amount, then we have to print less balance and waiting for deposit. And this particular thread, customer thread, whatever object you are going to create inside the PSVM, that thread has to wait forever. I mean, not forever, until and unless your deposit method will deposit the amount. Okay, deposit the amount. After depositing the amount, the deposit method, it is invoking the notify. Here you can see notify. So immediately what will happen, this particular withdrawal method will be notified that the amount has been deposited, so it will become active. Okay, so here the same thing, whenever we are invoking the withdrawal for a particular amount withdrawal, so here it is then that particular method is printing a message and entering into the waiting state, waiting for a deposit. And then whenever you are invoking the deposit method, immediately the amount gets deposited, and the waiting withdrawal method will be satisfied with that amount, and it will also complete its execution. It is very easy to understand. You can easily execute this program on the uh, what we call edit plus. Okay, the next concept we have the AWT, abstract window toolkit. And as I said, as I explained in the beginning of this class, that it is a mechanism, or it is a way to achieve GUI programming in Java. Abstract window toolkit. Okay, the procedure of executing this AWT programs, it is somewhat different than the regular Java programs. Okay, the procedure, the execution, program execution, everything we will see in our next class onwards. But here I will give some of the basic inputs related to this AWT programming. Okay, Java's AWT, or more familiarly known as abstract window toolkit, it is an API. So what is API? When I'm saying an API, what does it mean? API in the sense application program interface, application programming interface, API stands for. So what it is? API means it is the, in Java, specifically in Java, it is the collection of packages. We are going to have different packages under this API to support different options, like, okay, so getting GUI applications developed in Java, that we do with the help of this AWT API only, abstract window toolkit API only. Okay, so to develop GUI based, GUI is nothing but more familiarly window based applications. We are going to have windows over there, like checkboxes, like minimize, maximize, close buttons. We are going to have a proper user interface over there, a visible interface over there. Okay, so Java's AWT components are platform dependent. Okay, this is one of the drawback we can say. Okay, because of that reason, your AWT components will become heavyweight. Okay, and if the components are platform dependent, they will change from system to system, and they will change from system architecture to system architecture. They will change from operating system running. Okay, operating system running in that, if you are developing the application in Windows, there is a possibility that you may not get the same output in Linux. Okay, all these things you need to keep in your mind when you are working with this AWT. And AWT, see, before AWT we are having applets. After applets we got AWT. Applets are also one of the ways to achieve the GUI in Java. Okay, they are subtle, they are not in use, or we can say they are completely obsolete. Okay, they are no more in use. Your applets, your AWTs, even swings that we are going to study nowadays, nobody is using. We have a lot of advanced frameworks like Java FX we have after that. And more probably, if I mean to say, if you are going for an organization, let us say to work as a Java developer, if you are going for Infosys, or if you are going for the what we call a tech giant like Microsoft, Google. There you are going and there you are working as a Java professional over there. So what you will see over there and what we are studying over here, it is completely different. We are studying pure the pure version of Java. Okay, the Java how it is developed by Sun Microsystem people, or Java how it is developed by the Oracle people. But when you go to the working environment, organization environment, there what they will do with this pure Java, in the sense they will mold it, they will add their flavor in that Java. They will create their own packages, they will create their own classes, they will create their own variables over there. Okay, so uh, simply to say they are going to have their own frameworks. Here whatever we are studying, it is also a framework only. AWT is a framework, it is a collection of packages, classes, many different things. And Swing, it is also a framework. Struts, it is also a framework. Hibernates, it is also a framework. FX, it is also a framework. Okay, so we will study about AWT here. So so this AWT, it is an outdated version, it is a very old version, it is platform dependent. Because of that reason, it is no more in use, we can say. Okay, and AWT is heavyweight. Its components are using the resources of operating system. Why AWT is heavyweight? In the sense, it is directly interacting. Whenever you execute an AWT program, it will directly interact with many of the operating system components in order to get the window kind of look on the desktop or on the working environment, on the running executing environment. It will interact more with the um, operating system resources. Because of that reason, it is heavyweight. Okay, the Java AWT packages provide classes for AWT API, such as text fields, labels, text areas, radio buttons, checkboxes, choices, lists, etc. All these things we studied in HTML also, isn't it? To develop the web-based applications, all these things we studied in HTML. So the same thing to develop the standalone applications, not browser control application, rather the standalone in the sense they will execute in the operating system environment, they will not execute under the web browser environment. Remember this one. Okay, so for that purpose, we are going for this AWT programming, and it is one of the ways to achieve GUI programming in Java. Okay, before going into further, we need to understand how all the classes under this AWT API are grouped, or what we can say, uh, they are going to work together in order to give the full-fledged output to us. Okay, the hierarchy of Java's AWT classes are given below. First, we have the topmost class, or we can say the super class. Okay, or we can say the parent class of all the classes present in Java is nothing but your object class. We have the name object. It is the super class to all the available classes, not only the classes related to AWT, not only the classes related to util package, not only the classes related to lang package, IO package, all the classes, whatever class you take in Java, it will be the child class of your, it will be the subclass of your object class. Okay, so under that object class, we have the component class. The component class is directly inheriting the object class. Remember this one. And under this component class only, we have different components over here. Like you can see, we have the button, we have label, checkbox, choice, list, container. Okay, all like this, we have different classes under a container class. Because see, whatever objects we are going to develop using this button, if you create the button class object, you will get a button in your application. If you create the label class object, you will get a label, checkbox, choice, list, like that you can get different things. These container class subclasses, like your window or your panel. Okay, under this panel only we are having applet. Okay, and under this window we have frame and dialog. Okay, so these things, container, when we are saying, they are responsible for holding these objects, whatever GUI components we are creating over here. In order to hold these components, we have to depend on these container is nothing but, take the example of a window. Okay, where you can put the button. Can you put the button on the desktop? No, it is not possible. We can't put the button on the desktop. We need to create a window, or we need to create a panel, we need to create a frame, We need to create a dialog box. On that only we can put the button. Same like applet, we have to create any of these things first. We need to create any of these 5 things first, like window, frame, panel, dialog, applet. Any of these things you need to create first, and on these things you can put all these things. Okay, button, label, checkbox. Here I have given only few. We have a list, a very big list, we can say. Okay, so yeah, for everything you're getting the scroll boxes. For that also we have a particular class. Like this, we are going to have the scroll, isn't it, scroll bars. If you click like this, the page will scroll up, and if you click here, the page will scroll down, like that. So every single activity, even a particular mouse click on these GUI components, we need to configure and we need to handle. Remember this one. Application development is not an easy task, not an easy job. Especially when we are going for GUI based applications, you may think that it is very easy, but real time, in real time, when you start working, we need to handle all the things, whatever the user is going to do with your application. Suppose if you are using this, trying to crash, trying to make your application crash, he is going to play with it, isn't it? The job of testers, what they will do, they will try a loophole. Their job is to find out a loophole in your application, developed application. So simply what they will do, they will try to figure out how they can make your application to crash. So you need to handle all type of clicks or all type of actions, whatever the end user is going to perform on your application, on your GUI application. Every single click we need to handle it properly. If the user is clicking double click, if your user is doing drag and drop, how the application has to respond. If the user is giving some wrong entries into the text areas, into the radio buttons, then how the application should respond. All those things we need to implement. See here, the same thing: container, window, panel, frame, all these are responsible for holding the component objects. Okay, uh, if you read all, you will get the same idea. Just now I have explained. So container class objects, I mean container class subclasses, whatever we have, they are responsible for holding the component class objects. Okay, when we see the container as an entity, it is also an object of a component object. Remember this one, it is also a component, but it is capable of holding other components. Okay, so there are few useful methods, list of few useful methods we have, which we are going to use. So the add method, in order to add the components to the containers. Okay, so to add the components to the containers, or to add the components to the applications, we are using this add method. Then set size, to give a particular proper size to your GUI object, we use this set size. Set layout, I mean where you want that object to be I mean displayed, that we do with the help of layout, set layout. So then we have set visible. So definitely this you have to make it as 1, boolean status as 1, then only the object will be displayed on the output screen. Otherwise it will be hidden. The object will be added, but it will be in hidden. Okay, AWT examples, how we can start implementing the AWT programs, in the sense by extending the frame class, or by creating the object of frame class. There are two ways: inheritance and association. You can either extend the frame class, or you can create the object of the frame class. Extending, in the sense, you will get the properties, and creating the object and using that object, you can invoke all the methods from the frame class, isn't it? So whenever you want your class to be a GUI application, any one of these two you have to do. Okay, either you extend the frame class, or you create the object of frame class. Okay, so we have different ways. This is the basic way we can say. So when I'm saying frame, you can even go with window, you can even go with panel, you can even go with dialog box. Okay, but printing only the dialog box is not our intention, isn't it? So definitely we will go with a particular proper frame. Okay, AWT example by inheritance. So first approach we are seeing over here, so that is nothing but by extending the frame class. Frame is a class under component, isn't it? Under container. From component we got container, and from container we got frame. So when you create the instance, or when you extend the frame class, then what will happen? All the properties associated with that frame class will be inherited to your current class. So indirectly your current class will also become like a frame. So in this current class you can put any of the objects of your components class. So over here inside this frame, when I am invoking the constructor of this first class, okay, as you can see here, I have created the button, I have created the bounds are nothing but these are the coordinates. Okay, you have your frame like this, where you want to print that uh, button. You want it here, you want it here, you want it here, you want it here, where you want on this frame. So these coordinates will decide 30, 100, 80, 30. So from the four corners it will take, or from top, bottom, left, right, it will take the positioning, and it will position that button at a proper place on the frame window. Okay, next add of b will add that, I mean at this location it will be added. With the help of add we are adding that button on the frame. Then set size. So this is for positioning and this is for size. How much width, how much length you want for that button, that we are going to decide with the help of set size. Then set layout. This is a method which is helpful in order to give, see generally we have some predefined layouts, layout managers. So with the help of that layout also you can arrange all the elements on the frame. Instead of arranging every single element by your own, you can take the help of layout manager also, that we are going to study very soon. Okay, set visible. Already as I said, adding the component is not sufficient on the container. Definitely you have to make the visibility as true, then only you can see that component. So definitely we have to make the set visibility value as true, so that the component will be visible on the output screen. See, the execution of this program, it is somewhat different than your regular application program. So we can't directly execute these programs inside your Edit Plus. Okay, we need to do some settings, we need to do some configuration, that I will show in my tomorrow's class. Okay, so then we have example by association. So here what we are doing, as you can see here, we are not extending our class, user defined class, from the frame class. Rather what we are doing, we are creating the frame class object inside the constructor of this class, user defined class. So now using this constructor you can call all the methods: add method, set size method, set bound method. Okay, here, yeah, set bound, and of course the coordinates will the set bounds methods will be inside the button class. Okay, so then set size, set layout, then we have the set visibility. All these methods we are invoking using the frame class object. Now previously we have executed directly because our class is extending the frame class, but now it is not extending. So all the properties how we are going to achieve, by depending on the object. So this is association, we can say. This is not what we call inheritance, this is association. Okay, so this will also give the same output. Whatever we will get over here, this program will also give the same output. Tomorrow if possible I will try to execute these programs and I will show you the output, how we will get the GUI based output, that I will show you. Okay, so this is the output. Okay, so but I need to show it practically, isn't it? I need to show it how we are going to get it. Okay, tomorrow we will see. Then we have events and listeners. So just now I told you, anything you are doing on the application, you are clicking, you are dragging, okay, you are double clicking, you are hovering on the application, all these events, all these actions need to be handled. So how we are going to do that thing means with the help of events and with the help of listeners. So we are going to make people, or we are going to make processes to listen for the end user event to okay, end user actions or end user events, we can say. Suppose the end user is coming on your application and clicking, it has to be recorded. The end user is hovering onto the application, it has to be recorded. The end user is dragging onto your application, it has to be recorded. Who will record all these things? In the sense, the listeners will record. Listeners will record events. Events are nothing but just now whatever I have dictated: hovering, clicking, double clicking, dragging, all these are events. Events who will generate? The end user will generate with the help of mouse, with the help of keyboard, with the help of touch panel. The end user will generate the events, and those events must be recorded so that they can be handled, isn't it? Even, yeah, if you don't record a particular event, how you will handle? So first of all, first responsibility is we need to record. And who will record? The listeners will record. Who will listen that event? They will record. The listeners will record the event for you. And then we have the handlers, suitable handlers we are going to have for every listener. Okay, then whenever a particular listener is listening something on the application, immediately it will tell to the proper handler to handle that event. Okay, so changing the state of an object is known as an event. So you kept a button on the application, and somebody is coming and clicking on that button. So clicking, what it will do, it will change the state of that button object. You have a text box on the application, and somebody is coming to that text box and typing something. Typing will change the what we call event of typing will change the state of the text box object. Radio buttons, we have somebody is selecting radio buttons, so selecting a radio button will change its state. So like that. Okay, here I have given the examples for different events, that is clicking button, dragging mouse, okay, hovering on the application. All these are examples for events. The java.awt.event package, okay, we have a package. Event package will provide many event classes and listener interfaces for event handling. So event has to be recorded by the listener, and it has to be handled by an event handler. How all these things will be done, we will see. So here these are some of the event classes and their suitable listener interfaces. So if action event occurs, the action listener will listen to that. If mouse event occurs, mouse listener or mouse motion listener will listen to that. So for every event class, we have a suitable listener class, listener interface. So here it is a class and it is an interface, that you remember. So just we need to understand all these things. So steps to perform: first of all, we need to register that. Register is nothing but record only. Okay, uh, the component with a suitable listener, with a suitable action handler, we need to register. Every component has to do all these things in order before giving the proper output. Okay, so registering methods, we have for registering the components with the listener, many classes provide the registration methods. Like button class, it is having add action listener. Okay, menu item, add action listener. Okay, then text field, add action listener, add text listener. Likewise, depending upon the type of object that you are adding to the frame window, or that you are adding to your application, we need to remember the suitable event class and its suitable listener interface. Okay, what type of action, or what type of event the what we call GUI object or the GUI component will generate. What I mean, see, if you are keeping a button, is it possible to write something on the button? No, we can only click that button. So add action listener is possible. It is not possible to perform add text listener, but whereas on a text field, or on a text box, we can perform the add text listener also. This is just the example I have given to you. Okay, so text area will also have add text listener. Checkboxes will have add item listener. Okay, choices will also have add item listener. Lists will have action listener as well as item listener, both. Okay, so event handling, we can put the event handling code. So whatever event you are generating, definitely we need to put some code, suitable code, so that the event will be handled. Okay, so whatever code we put suitable to a particular type of event, we call that code as event handling code. So where we can keep that event handling code means we can put within the class, within another classes, or we can even put the code without any name. Okay, so all these things are too early before discussing any of the examples. So here I have given the examples. So if here we are keeping the code, event handling code, okay, action listener, uh, yeah, within the class. So over here, when you type welcome on that one, you are generating the event, and how that event will be handled we will see when we do this program practically. But here if I go and I do some click, it will not give because it is just a image, but I need to show it practically. I need to generate this output practically with the help of this code. I need to show it. When you click on that click me button, what you will get, that I need to show. So here, this is here we have added the action listener, or we can say the event handling code inside the class. Okay, inside the class we have written, but over here we have written inside an outer class, and you can even do with an anonymous class. Anonymous class in the sense a class without any name. Okay, how we will achieve these things, I will show you. Then we have how we can add a particular button inside your AWT frame. So yeah, here I have taken the simple example and I have added the AWT button. So this will give you the output. Then yeah, you can even add the action listener to that button, and when you click on the click here, you will get some proper output. All yeah, we have labels, text fields, text areas, checkboxes, checkbox groups, choices, list, canvas, okay, scroll bar, menu bar, pop-up, panel, dialog, all these graphical elements you will get. Yeah, if I start showing these graphical elements practically one by one to you, it will take more than a semester to me to complete this GUI. Okay, so that's the reason I will show only the button class. I mean button, how you can create a button and how you can add that button and how you can get the output from that button, and rest of all, including rest of all, we'll do another program, and there you need to understand all these things. Okay, so the remaining stuff we will try to complete in our upcoming classes hopefully. Thank you very much, students.